Down American Home, followed by a Steadicam. Not the most inspiring elements, perhaps, but that's pretty much all that John Carpenter had when, for 3 weeks in 1978, he shot what would become one of the most successful independent movies of all time. Halloween had a ruthless simplicity, not least in its plot, which concerned the epitome of evil, Michael Myers, returning to the small town where he first made his mark as a child and attempting over the course of one long night to kill a bunch of people. No rhyme, no reason, no motive, just fear. In anybody else's hands it would have been dumb, but Carpenter's stylishly suspenseful thriller hit a nerve with American teenagers, spawning a string of sequels and kicking off a row of teen slasher movies which flourished in the 1970s, ripened and rotted in the 80s, before dying and being reborn in the 90s thanks to the postmodern likes of Scream. Tonight marks the 21st anniversary of Halloween, the year that Michael Myers comes of age, and the night John Carpenter came home. Halloween is 21 years old, and I just watched it again just before this. And it's extraordinarily fresh, and it still looks very vibrant and punky. How does it feel this long after making a film like that, for it still to be talked about, for people still to ask you questions about it like it was a new movie?
I think it's an incredibly flattering thing to have people still talk about Halloween. I don't think we all realized the impact that it was going to have, or that it had. I watched it again recently myself, and I wish the jokes were better.
You can't come over tomorrow. I thought you were babysitting for me.
The only reason she babysits is to have a place to...
Shit.
I have a place for that.
All these years later, the horror genre has gone through this strange kind of death and rebirth through the films like Scream of Kevin Williamson, which make very great play of referring to Halloween and using it as the Bible. How did you feel seeing that film, and how do you now feel about Halloween's role as the big daddy in the way that Psycho was to you before?
When I saw Scream, it was amazing that I spent so much time talking about Halloween. I mean, certainly it made me look great.
Can you tell me how Halloween first came about as a project?
I met with Mustafa Akkad and Irwin Yablans, and they wanted to make a low-budget, $200,000 horror film called The Babysitter Murders, about the serial killer who stalks babysitters. I made a deal. I'll make the movie for $200,000, but I get final cut, and I get my name above the title. You don't, no creative input, don't tell me anything. I'll show you the movie. And they held up to their word. At some point we were writing the movie, Deborah and I, Irwin Yablans called and said, why don't you set it on Halloween night? Well, that's a pretty good idea. And he said, matter of fact, we could call it Halloween.
Now, up until that point, the films that you had done had been specifically, left field. There's the satire of Dark Star. There's the savage intensity of Assault on Precinct 13, which is somewhere between a thriller and, I think it has, a horror edge. The Babysitter Murders sounds as a pitch to be a very just straightforward slasher premise, but what you did to it was to turn it on its head. Tell me something about how you took that project on and made it your own.
Well, when you're dealing with, in Halloween or any kind of horror movie like that, you're dealing in very familiar territory. Psycho is kind of the granddaddy of that kind of movie. Not that it's the greatest ever made, but it's the one that influenced everyone. That principle of the suspense, the Hitchcock suspense thing of showing the bomb, and you can get much more suspense than surprise, is true, but what you can do is, once you establish the suspense, then you can do your shocks along the way, and that'll scare the hell out of people. They'll go completely crazy. They know something's going to happen. In a horror movie, you go and you know something's going to happen. The question is when.
Standing on the lawn, he could have seen inside.
I thought the idea was, I don't know about this, but I needed a job. I wanted to be a director. So I added this slight supernatural edge to this guy. Sure, he's a person who escapes from a mental institution, and he comes back to revisit his small town, but he can't be killed, and there's a certain feeling of, maybe he is not quite a human being. But this is somehow something bigger which is Donald Pleasance's role in the film. He keeps saying, "You don't understand what you're dealing with here. You do not understand. This is something," in a sense he's saying, this is like the devil.
I spent 8 years trying to reach him, and then another 7 trying to keep him locked up, because I realized that what was living behind that boy's eyes was purely and simply evil.
And in the end, it just becomes relentless. It just keeps going. But not relentless in terms of like a siege or an attack, but he's everywhere. Don't go in the house, don't go up the stairs. It's that kind of feel.
Did Donald Pleasance step in after Christopher Lee had turned the movie down? Is that true?
Mm-hmm. I approached Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing, both of them, because I loved them from the Hammer movies. And neither of them were interested in making this little movie. We were casting about to try to find somebody who could play that part, and so I chose Donald because I had loved his work and everything he's done, from The Great Escape to Cul-de-sac. He was a kind of perfect victim in Cul-de-sac. But in this, he was going to play this, this warning guardian and avenging psychiatrist with a gun.
You believe everything Richie tells you?
No.
Can you tell me something about Jamie Lee Curtis? It was the thing that really broke her, and she has a history which makes sense in terms of the movies.
Deborah was very excited because this was Janet Leigh's daughter. And so then we could kind of ride on Psycho's coattails a little bit. So Jamie came in and read, and she was just wonderful.
All right. The boogeyman can only come out on Halloween night, right?
Right.
Well, I'm here tonight. I'm not about to let anything happen to you.
Promise?
Promise.
Halloween opened in various places across the country. They moved it, and to uniformly bad reviews.
What kind of criticism did those reviews
No,
have?
this isn't scary. This is stupid.
Oh, not scary.
Not scary. What did Pauline Kael say? She said he has no sense of timing at all. There is no rhythm to this movie.
As a musician, that must have particularly hurt, because also you oversee your editing, and that's actually the defining factor of a John Carpenter film.
Rhythmless. No rhythm.
Tell me something about scoring your own movies, because in the case of Halloween, that theme has now become absolutely synonymous with, modern terror. It jingles in the brain. How did it come to you?
My dad was, when I was 13 or 14 years old, taught me how to play 5/4 time on bongos. So years later, I thought, well, I'll just get on the piano and I'll do octaves, ding, 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 and go up. And then just came. 5/4, it's nuts. Where does it end and what's going on? You can't find the start and the stop of it. It's off. It's simple. I could play it. I'm cheap and I'm fast and as a musician, so that was it. Well, Halloween was always designed as an exploitation movie, as a drive-in movie, as a movie that's going to show a week or so and then be gone. But then there's secondarily something started to happen at the box office. People started screaming wildly at this thing as they were seeing it, and it's the word of mouth. What was a word of mouth movie? I never had any idea that they'd go as crazy as they did. Never. They were screaming and yelling, and it was unbelievable.
Can you tell me something about how, from a stylistic point of view, you were experimenting with, what's now called Steadicam, Panaglide at the time. Can you tell me something about what that look means, what you get from it?
You mount the camera on the man, literally, and you can walk upstairs and through buildings and so forth, and it illuminates the dolly track, which has always been a problem in movies because you're limited in terms of your movement of where you can dolly. So I thought this would be a great idea to use as a point of view shot.
Let's look at some specific sequences of the film. Let's start with the opening sequence. This is the original Crime in 1963, in which we first get that strange, wobbling, widescreen point of view shot. Talk me through this opening sequence.
Well, we come into a shot in front of this house, and you're in a Panaglide. You're gliding, floating a little bit. So we're assuming that perhaps we're in someone's point of view, although we can also assume that something is strange here. Something's a little off kilter.